The World Bank held its country economic memorandum, Nigeria's development update, which highlighted key areas in a bid to revamp the economy. The report showed that Nigeria is in a challenging and deteriorating economic situation. It was noted that the country's economic performance has weakened since the previous NDU was published. Dr. Alex shared key findings in the report.
So here, there's the exchange rate management that does fuel inflation because of the way in which the constrained FX supply pushes pressure into the parallel market, distorts that rate, increases import prices, and so forth. Related to that, the import and FX restrictions, anything that is restricting the supply of intermediate and consumer products. And then the mix of monetary and policy settings. So, these are all very interrelated, but we've seen the tightening of the monetary policy rate, but going in the other direction is the provision of subsidized credit and, more importantly, the monetization of the fiscal deficit. Why is the fiscal deficit having to be monetized? Because of the drain from the PMS subsidy. So you can see the many sort of interrelated. With apologies to Nancy for the mention of potential, both the summary in the NDU and the CM report goes into depth on ways in which there could be choices made that would constitute a path out of this. I'm conscious of time and I want to hand over to the discussion, which I'm sure will be a sort of forward-looking, solutions-oriented panel discussion. But the way we break it out is to consider kind of macro and institutional enablers, what needs to be done to create a more solid sort of macroeconomic policy framework that's the necessary condition for growth. And then there's a range from things that can be done quickly and frankly urgently, even if they take political will, good communication and so on, they could be done fairly quickly, subsidy reform, exchange rate reform, and others. And then on the right, that macro platform is the necessary condition, but other things that would be needed to really give impetus to that growth engine of the economy and to get high quality private sector-led job creation going is what we call the investment accelerators, with again, a range of reform ideas, removal of trade restrictions, the power sector challenge, of course, other kinds of infrastructure and finance.
The presentation was immediately followed by a panel discussion.
Since 2021, the NNPC had stopped contributing a cent to the Federation account from proceeds of oil revenues. They claim that the entire domestic oil revenue, our share of joint ventures and production sharing contracts, when they sell, is not even enough to cover this PMS subsidy. In the National Economic Council, where the Vice President chairs with all the state governors and the central bank governor as members, we saw this problem building from around March in 2021, and we raised the red flag, and a NEC committee was formed to study the problem and come up with solutions before it gets out of whack. We agreed, and we worked with the bank at the time. We agreed by November 2021 that this subsidy should go, because we could see that at best it will reduce state revenues by about 20 to 30% in 2022, unless it is ended. And that would have significant impact on the solvency of many states. And we all agreed on that, and the federal government seemed to agree, but somehow the consensus was not implemented. Now, most state governments, other than the oil-producing states that still get their 13% derivation, whether something comes to Federation account or not, most of the states that are not oil-producing, Lagos accepted because of their large tax base, are under pressure. Unlike the federal government, we do not have recourse to central bank financing. And frankly, the states are the multiple losers of some of these policy misalignments.
The panelists also discussed key economic challenges which needs to be addressed as a way of boosting investor confidence.
When the National Steering Committee was set up, they invited the three biggest political parties. Let's have a national development plan that all the parties will sign on to. Yeah. So that whichever party comes in, there will be no reversal of what we did. Apart from the party in power, only one political party turned up. The other one never attended the meeting. So how do you build consensus?
We need to go back to that decade. And it's very interesting that the person who chaired the Economic Council through that period, with people like him, is contesting to be president again. And certainly, I mean, if we have our heads screwed on, that should be our next president.
When Governor El-Rufai was talking about the next president, we must not only stop at removing subsidy and then getting the exchange rates realigned. There are other policies. We have been, our development plans, everything has been characterized by these stop-go policies. We have a good policy in place. It will be implemented for 1 year or not even implemented at all. You have a new administration, and then we just reverse. That cannot engender confidence in people who want to invest in the economy. And I did say at the beginning that our policies must not only be good, but people must perceive them to be sustainable. That this year we have a good policy, next year we are not going to reverse. So there are a plethora of policies that we need that incoming government to say that let's continue with the good things so that there will be confidence and our markets can function very well.
So if our policies are not geared towards getting us to put our own money in the opportunities we see, why is there so much, why are foreigners not investing in real estate that's booming? Nigerians are driving the real estate investments across the country. So for me, locals must, because they are closer to the opportunities, once they do invest and they see the opportunities, and outsiders now see the kind of returns, that will serve as an encouragement to getting other people in. But what is particularly interesting is that even locals who are holding Naira, whose Naira will not be devalued when they invest, are not investing as much as they should. So why do you expect someone with his dollars to come in, invest his dollars in your country at 400 and takes his money out at 800?
Diaspora remittances rely upon credible exchange rate. If the premium between the official rate and the market rate is so wide, diaspora remittances crash. There was a year, I recall, we got $30 billion from diaspora remittances, almost as much as oil. This year, from all indications, it's not going to be higher than 15, 16 billion. On average, we get 20 to 25 billion because of this problem. I agree with every point made. I'm not saying that fuel subsidy and exchange rate are the only issues. There are, I was part of Obasanjo's government. We had to design complementary policies and stick to them and implement before the results came. But these two, if a government cannot face these two and face the Nigerian people and explain to them why it is necessary to take this money and invest in healthcare, in cash transfers, in education, in security, instead of subsidy that benefits owners of many four-wheel drive vehicles, then how can that government even keep to policy, formulate sound policies and stick to them? To me, this is as clear as day and night. If that cannot be addressed, then the other things cannot happen.
The founder of Leader Network, Irene David Arinze, during the question and answer session, engaged the governor of Kaduna State on the impact of political consequences.
What I hear you say is governors are somewhat scared of the political consequence of putting their foot down and saying whatever it would take, I would ensure that everything that needs to be done to get my state working, is still pending. So what do you think, or what would you suggest that they need to start doing? taking away every form of political consequence. I know that you had to sack some teachers that were not performing in your state. So with respect to this, how can we start to take this conversation to the next level? I reckon that as business people would say, oh, this is my business. When it comes to politics, I mean, that is also, some people's business, right? So what can we start to do to move this conversation forward? Thank you.
The question on political consequences, I think it will be very naive to say that politicians are not afraid of being voted out of office. Politicians are afraid. When I decided that I was going to sack 22,000 semi-literate teachers, I was told that I was not going to be re-elected. But I went ahead because I did not care to be re-elected. I didn't like the job anyway. Okay? All right? I was forced into it. I didn't want to run for governor. President Buhari said I must. So, if the only thing I will do is one term but get rid of bad teachers so that public schools will function, I was ready to do it. Okay, but not everyone is ready to take that kind of risk. This is the problem. And this is why, during the debate on constitutional amendments, some of us made the suggestion that maybe we should amend our constitution to have one term of 7 years. So that you don't have to go for re-election. You have one shot to do the right thing, and that's it. But to say that politicians do not take into account election cycle is being naive. We have a 4-year election cycle. How much can you do in 4 years? This is why I put on the table that the next president of Nigeria must be willing to take very difficult decisions, cut the cost of governance at the federal level, flip the expenditure ratios from 30% capital expenditure, 70% recurrent, to 70% capital, 30% recurrent. Some states are doing it. Lagos is doing it. Kaduna has been doing 60, 70% capital. But we had to take some very difficult decisions, and we didn't care about political consequences for the simple reason that I didn't care to be re-elected. Okay? But not everyone is willing to do that. There are many states with bad teachers, but they choose, we'll train them. How do you train an illiterate to teach? You can't. You have to fire him. But many are not willing to do that. And there are issues like that. Okay? So it's something that we need to bear in mind.
This is Leader Network.